Okay, girls, so welcome to the last SCA class of the summer for this series on Midrashim. For the final class, I'm going to actually do something interesting, which I think is very fitting for the final class. We're not actually going to look at Midrashim on this week's Perashat. We're actually going to look at Midrashim that I discovered throughout my journey of appreciating and delving deeper into Midrash that I felt were part of my deeper understanding of Midrash and my appreciation of Midrash. And there were a few Midrashim that really spoke to me in that journey. Okay, you girls are either entering high school or in high school. Just to let you know, this journey of mine of appreciating Midrash didn't happen until a few years ago. Okay, it didn't happen until my late 20s. This is not something that happened, so that's already, for some of you, 10 years ahead of your age right now. But if you can come to an appreciation of Midrash, at this early age, it would really be wonderful for your own self. And to go back to our first class that we had, and just to start with that, to circle back to our first class, open that up and then I'll share my screen, was the Rambam that we read, right? We read a very important Rambam in our first class. I'm going to share my screen. We'll look at it again, where he broke down those who read Midrash and explain Midrash into three groups, right? The first group was the group that believed that everything in the Midrash was literal, and everything in the Midrash happened exactly as the Midrash says. And he says, even things that are far from reality, they explain as something real. And he says, it makes the Chachamim look silly, because it's not what they meant. He says, the second group, anyone remember what the second group says about Midrash? No? Okay, I'll go over it. The second group, someone unmuted themselves. If you unmuted yourself, don't be shy.
Yeah, they embarrass the rabbis by saying this is what they think.
And they say what?
They say this is what they think, it's so silly, and they make
Exactly, right? Exactly. They also understand it literally, but because they understand it literally, they use it to actually make fun of Hazal. Right? So, you have the first two groups, right? And then the third group, and I'm just recapping the first class of a number of weeks ago, where we looked at the way that Rambam reads Midrashim, that the first two groups he mentions, one views every Midrash very literally, and the second also views the Midrash very literally, but they make fun of Hazal. The third group, which I'm hoping you girls can aspire to be part of this third group. And if you remember, it says the third group that Rambam says, there's such a small group that maybe they're not even a group, because they understand that the Midrashim, that the Chachamim spoke in parables, and the way they spoke, it was there to teach a lesson. It was there to teach something deeper, but it doesn't mean that it's literal, right? For example, the first Midrash that I teach usually in Sefer Bereshit, right? It says in the Pasuk, let's open up that Midrash. It's one of the Midrashim that were part of this journey. The Midrash says as follows. The Midrash says that the sun and the moon, who wants to finish that line? The sun and the moon. Anyone know that Midrash about the sun and the moon? Nobody? Come on, we taught that Midrash in Barkai.
The sun said, there's only one crown, you can't have two kings, and then... No,
not the sun.
Said that. The moon said that.
Yeah, good. Moon complained, and Lori, I just learned this, we just reviewed this Midrash for your father today, interestingly enough. The moon complained and said, how could we both share the crown, right? It's not meant, meaning, how could there be two great stars, right? The sun and the moon. We can't share it. So what happened? The moon got its wish. It got smaller. Now, when you read this midrash, let me ask you, maybe you do. When you read this midrash, do you think that the moon and the sun talk, or the moon talks? Does the moon talk? All right, good. I'm assuming you're shaking your head. No, a moon does not speak. And so the Chachamim, right? You have to realize what's going on here. Look at the pasuk. Vayas Elohim et shenei hamerot hagedolim. The pasuk says that God made the two great lights, et hamaor hagadol, et hamaor hakaton. The Midrash is sensitive and says, why would the pasuk first call them gedolim and then say one's gadol and one's katon? Choose. The peshat answer is one is bigger than the other. The Midrash finds an ability to use this to teach something about life. How? Well, we like parables. We like, right, as humans, we like stories. We can understand stories that relate to us, right? When I teach a boys class, many times I'll use sports references. Okay, Paul, that for you too, don't worry. I'll use sports references. And with the sports references, a lot more is understood, right? When you use examples, maybe movies, let's say, teacher uses a movie that you're used to knowing, right? And they use that and explaining something. So yeah, you'll connect with it more. So at that time, the Midrash, people spoke in this language. They understood this idea, right? That it wasn't literal, but there's something deeper being taught here. Right, girls? Because someone tell me what the lesson here is of this Midrash while we're speaking about this Midrash? What's the lesson of this sun and the moon Midrash?
Like not to be arrogant.
Right. Not only that, Lori, your father actually pointed this out to me today. If you look at the way the Rashi is written, the Midrash, that's called binyan hitpael. It happened to the levana, to the moon, as if kind of she did it to herself. By complaining, she got her wish. Her wish was not to share. Okay, fine, you're not going to share. You'll be less. No, sorry. Right? You don't want to share. You don't want people to have the same thing as you. Great. They'll have more, you'll have less. Not a problem. So there's a very special midrash that's very dear to me. And it was so dear to me that when I finally understood what this midrash was doing, this literally, and I'll use the pun, my eyes and brain lit up, and you'll understand why it's a pun in a moment. But this midrash really spoke to me, and I hope I could still write this book. I did mention this to you. A few years ago, I started writing a book on midrash. I wrote a couple of pages of a few midrashim. I called it Mipenine Rashi, from the gems of Rashi, to explain the beauty of the midrashim that Rashi was bringing and what was trying to be accomplished through these beauty of the midrashim. And the first midrash that I wrote down on paper, I remember these, those yellow papers they give out in school, like those huge yellow notepads that you write on. I remember writing on it. I lost it, but this is how it goes, okay? The pasuk says, "Vatara yisha vateled ben, vatere oto kitovu v'tispeneu shalosh hayerachim." Right? The woman, who's the woman, girls? Who's the woman here? Girls, who's the woman? Who's the mother in this pasuk?
Yocheved.
Very good, Yocheved. Vatere oto kitovu v'tispeneu shalosh hayerachim. She sees that Moshe is good, and she hides him for 3 months. Says Rashi. Who wants to read this Rashi? It's not in the script of Rashi, so you have nothing to... No, I'm joking. But, Safari doesn't put it in the script of Rashi. But anyone want to read this Rashi? Kitovu. A lot of takers. Nobody? You guys want me to read it?
I'll read it.
Okay, go.
כשנולד נתמלא הבית כולו אורה.
Oh, of course you want to read this, Aura. Oh, I didn't realize. Now I figured out why you decided to read this one. Did you realize it when you saw it?
I saw it and then I said, okay, I have to.
Beautiful. Do you remember learning this, Rashi?
I think so, yeah.
possible that when Moshe Rabbeinu was born, the room filled with light. What? Huh? Where do you get this from, right? Where does the Midrash? And so when I read this years ago, I'm like, okay, it's cute, right? The leader of Am Yisrael, he's a leader, light. But then I finally read the Midrash in the Gemara itself. Look at the Gemara. Masechet Sotah. Vatere oto ki tovu. His mother saw that he was good. Tanya. Rabbi Meir Omer Tov Shemo. Rabbi Meir says, you know why he says ki tovu? The mother saw that his name was good, meaning his name should be good. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Tuvya Shemo. No. Ki tovu means that God is good. So let's name him Tuvya. By the way, why is the Midrash speaking now about the name of Moshe? We know his name is Moshe. Girls, as a side point.
Because Batya named him. Not
right?
Yocheved.
Well, right? Bat Paro, that's a separate Midrash. We'll get to it one day, why she's called Batya. But Bat Paro named her. So what was his name until she named him? Tov or Tuvya. Rabbi Nehemiah Omer, Hagun Viut. It says Ki Tov Hu. It means he Tov, he's good for prophecy. Right? This idea of Tov means that he's ready. Aherim Omrim Nolad Keshehu Mahul. He was born circumcised. V'Chachamim Omrim. B'Sha'ah Shenolad Moshe, Nitmale Habayit Kulo Or. Ketiv Hacha, Vatere Oto Ki Tov Hu. Ochtiv hatam vayad Elohim et haor ki tov. Can anyone explain what the comparison that the Midrash is making here? Where does the Midrash get from that the room was filled with light? What pasuk is it connecting it to? Dead silence in the room. It's the most awkward part of Zoom. It's like, are they thinking? Yeah. Girls, look at the pasuk. It's in front of you. What pasuk in Sefer Bereshit is being quoted here as a connection to this pasuk?
Vayar Elokim et haor ki tov.
Right, the pasuk says, Vayar Elokim et haor ki tov. And here it says, Vatere oto ki tov hu. Oh, 1 second, the reader should say. I know these words, kitov, that's in creation. I know when it says that someone saw that something was good. That's the first time it's said is in the Torah with creation of the light. Says the Midrash, we're making a connection here between the way Moshe Rabbeinu's birth is described to us. She saw that he was good, kitov, right? With God seeing that it was good. What was good? The light. The world was filled with light. Now, what do the Chachamim want when they're comparing Moshe's birth to the birth of the world? What are the Chachamim essentially doing? Any ideas? No embarrassment here, girls. Any ideas? Yeah, Lori.
Maybe because the purpose of the world is for Torah. Moshe brought Torah, so brought Or to the world.
Good. So you have to think in terms of the Midrash that the Torah, when the world was created, it was created for the world. And that was creation. When that didn't work out, the Torah and Am Yisrael were created in order to be a light to the nations. A what? Oh, a light to the nations. An Or Lagoyim. Who initiated that process? God through Moshe. So it only makes sense, and by the way, Lori, when you say that God created the world for the Torah, that's also a Midrash that's based on the idea that when the Torah was written, it was written after Am Yisrael was already created. When the world was created, it was created for everybody, and so it still is, but the concept that the way the Torah's creation story is written down to us with Moshe's birth. And it uses the same language. And when it uses the same language, it's telling us a story. Remember last Sefer where the world was created and things went wrong? The light might have disappeared. Well, now we have another light, and now we have a different creation. And this is the creation of Am Yisrael through the birth of Moshe. Girls, when I figured that out, my brain just went like 1 second. Girls, where else do we have light in the life of Moshe?
After Har Sinai,
What
When he
happened to him?
his face was glowing.
Good. Good. The word there is not or with an aleph, it's karan or, which means his face is radiating, but of course it was radiating. He was filled with light. The esh of Hashem at the burning bush, the esh of the Torah, it's all light. We say kiner mitzvah betorah or, right? Yes. Camille, I really need to find time to write one, but you know what? If on any topic, I think this would be the best topic, because I need to write a book about this, because it's just the connections. Okay, fine. I don't know when to start writing all this. You know, you would think Corona time's a great time for it. I actually got more busy. But the or of Moshe Rabbeinu, it's a light. His life was filled with light. So the Midrash with this small Rashi, the room is filled with light. Look at the word used there. Nitmale habayit kulo ora. The house filled with light. Think about a house, right? It connects with the other midrash that says that Shifra and Pu'ah were Yocheved and Miriam, because what was their reward? Vayas lahem batim. God made for them houses, and here the house is filled with light. And when I figured out this midrash and it all clicked for me, it was really, I think, the first time where my mind just like attached itself to the Hachamim and Hazal. When I went, wow, so powerful. Yet if we try to take it too literally, I think that was the danger that Rambam was mentioning. By the way, this might be one of the Rashis that the Rambam might say might have happened in actuality. Right? There's no reason to doubt that this could happen. But the concept behind it is really deeper. Like, even if it didn't happen, it did happen. Light filled the room when he was born, even if there really wasn't light filling the room, there was. Because Moshe Rabbeinu was there. And the light of the Torah was there. And the light of a new world being created was there. It's the beginning of Sefer Shemot. Right? And now we go to another Rashi over here. Right? Another famous Rashi. ותרד בפרעה לרחוס על האור ונערותיה הולכות על יד האור ותרד הטבע בתוך הסוף ותשלח את אמתה ותיקחיה. She goes to bathe, and then she sends her ama to get the teba. Now, does anyone know the famous midrash on this pasuk?
Her arm stretched out.
Very good. The famous Space Jam scene where Michael Jordan's hand, stretches. I don't know if you've ever seen Space Jam, but his hand stretches out and he dunks the ball into the basket. Any of you ever seen Space Jam before? No? Come
no,
on.
But I'm watching Let's Dance. My family's obsessed with it.
Oh, come on. There's a famous Space Jam scene. And I'm telling you, I think about it every time I think about this midrash, where Michael Jordan, he reaches his hand out, and he basically his arm stretches to the extent that, here we go, famous scene. I mean, this is like Bat Par'ah for me, and this is where here it is, famous Space Jam scene. Do you see it? Michael Jordan's hand stretching out, right? Okay, there's his hand fighting all these beasts in Space Jam. So her hand stretched out. Now, if you look at Rashi over there on this spot, Rashi actually prefers the explanation that it means her maidservant, that her handmaid. Et amata, et shifhata, which most people don't know. Most people assume that Rashi is the one who teaches that Bat Paro's hand stretched out. Girls, is that what you learned in school? That it's Rashi who says this? Anyone? No? Well, I always learned it as Rashi. Actually, Rashi brings the Midrash and he says, Leshon Yad, right? That the Midrash says that Ama is Yad, and Rashi says it can't be, because it would only be a hand if you put Dagesh in the Mem. It would have to be Ammata. But I want you to consider for a moment, what was the point of this Midrash past the dikduk of this word? Let's say it really means she sent her servant. What were the rabbis trying to teach by saying that she sent her hand out? What can be the deeper message of this?
Maybe like if you set your mind to something like L'Shem Shemayim, Hashem's gonna help you fulfill it.
Okay, very good. Right? It's like you put in the effort. Well, what was her Shem Shamayim part?
I don't know.
To save baby. Yeah.
And what's the problem with saving the baby?
It's against her father's decree.
But she doesn't know yet, but the Midrash may be saying back, oh, against her father's decree, she's doing something like she's overstretching her boundaries. Actually, if Yola was on, her mother mentioned that Norman Didier actually said this idea. I don't know if anyone knows who Norman Didier is, but if you remember Mora Rachel and is it Rachel and Morris Didier, their father. So he says that it's like her going against the decree of her father. So she's like stretching out her hand. I think of it a little differently. Where do we know the yad? Where do we know a hand from the story of Mitzrayim? Not a trick question, girls. Where do we know a hand? Yeah, Lori.
When Moshe's hand turns white is like one of the simanim.
Oh, interesting. But where else do we have hands with saving Bnei Israel?
Maybe, wait a minute.
Yeah, say it.
Like Yad Halakha.
Yep, Yad Hazakah, exactly. I think of the Yad Hazakah, but look at the next word, Zeroa Netuya, an outstretched arm. Maybe the Midrash could be saying that Am Yisrael's salvation that ended up with God only works when there are humans who are willing to get involved in the process, right? When humans are willing to stand up against evil and are willing to save babies and to save people, then God will bring his yad. But God's yad would not come if not for people like Shifra, Pu'ah, Yocheved, Miriam, Bat Paro. If not for them, there's no salvation. There's no Am Yisrael. Who does she end up saving? She saves the one who's going to take Bnei Israel out of Egypt through God's vehicle of the Yad Hazakah. And that's the way I think of this Midrash. Now, I could be totally wrong with it. I'm reading it. But that's the beauty of Midrash. Any of you ever dig a hole anywhere? Maybe by the beach, by the sand, maybe by dirt, maybe ever, or when you're digging a hole, digging requires work. And when you dig a little bit, you get a little bit. When you dig deeper, you ever go to like the beach and you're digging and you try to get the water that you're digging deep into so it could connect. Ever make a sandcastle? Any of you? You're trying to make like the water area and you dig through it and you want the channels to all connect? Am I talking? Oh, good. Okay. Can you
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Good. So now think of that as midrash. Derash is lidrosh, means to seek out. It's like you're digging, and when you're digging, you dig a little bit, you get a little bit. You dig more, you get more. You dig even deeper, you get more and more. And so, yes, it could be that my explanation's a little bit deep, and then another explanation's even deeper, and that's the beauty of midrash. The hachamim, in my understanding, were so deep in their understanding of the Torah that sometimes we need to connect different things. Their minds were computers, pre-computers, okay? They made all these connections before that. So it leads me now to the next midrash. And the next midrash was asked to me by a student when I was teaching in Flatbush. And I actually did not know this midrash. I didn't remember it from elementary school. And the student asked me what it meant. And here's how it goes. Vayet Aaron et yado al meme Misraim, vata al sefardeya vatechas Misraim, vatal sefardeya, says Rashi, in the midrash he says, not the Peshat, sefardeya ahat haita ve'ayu makin ota v'imatezet nechidim zeu midrasho. There was one huge frog, and what would happen every time they hit that frog?
Like they would try to hit it, but just more and more kept coming.
Good. A lot more frogs just jumping out of it. Now, a kid asked me, and in school, this is, I think, a 6th, 7th grader, Rabbi, what's the purpose of this midrash? He goes, you explain the beauty of midrashim, but what's the purpose of this midrash? Right? What exactly is going on with this midrash? Can you explain it? And I didn't have an answer. At the time, there was a rabbi in Flatbush. He used to be the principal. His name is Rabbi Eliach. I used to learn with him every single week for like a half hour, 45 minutes. We loved learning together. And he said, Nathan, it goes as follows. He said, the Mitzrim's reaction to the Makkah. What was their reaction to the Makkah? To hit the Makkah. Their reaction was not, we're wrong, we're humble, we made a mistake. Their reaction was to hit it even more. Now, what happens when you fight fire with fire? The Midrash, he says, is like a hyperbole. It's like an exaggeration. More and more and more came out. You imagine it just means that their problems became bigger and bigger and bigger, right? Their problems got larger and larger and larger and more pronounced. So much so that it took over all of Mitzrayim. Now, where did the idea even come from? There was one frog. Where does the Midrash even get the starting point? And you have to think about this. Where does the Midrash even get the starting point to say that there was one and not many? Right? Remember, the Midrash is based off of something in the Pasuk. There's something in the Pasuk that's strange. And Ora, I saw you unmuted yourself. You can unmute yourself again. What's strange in the Pasuk? No? Okay. So I'm going to show you all the Pasukim, and then you can maybe see what's strange with this specific Pasuk. Right? In the Pasukim, in Shemot, Perek Het, look around here for the Makkah's name, and then look in here. And then look when it actually happens. Okay, look here at the name of the Makkah, and then look at Pasuk Bet, and see if you can find the answer.
The Makkah,
what the problem
in like singular, and then it says it in plural.
Exactly. Everywhere else, it's called the Sephardiim. You know my famous corny joke on this, girls, right? Paro only wanted Ashkenazim in Egypt, so you got rid of all the Sephardim? No? So, come on. You don't get as bad as that.
That's good.
Croak. So here you have Sephardiim. Okay? Yeah, it's one of my more awful jokes. But you know I made it up because it has to do with Sfaradim and stuff like that. So all of a sudden the Pasuk says, Vatal ha-Sephardeya. So the Midrash uses that to explain that there was one big Sephardeya and many came out of it. But again, it just opened my eyes to the beauty of the Midrash. Look how it finds the difference in the Pasuk. And then look what it does with it. The lesson that it teaches is that when you hit a makah, when you fight fire with fire or hitting with hitting, you only make the problem worse, right? And Rabbi Eliach opened my eyes, by the way, that I'm like, I don't get the midrash. And then he explained it. I'm like, oh, I don't get it because I didn't try to explain it enough. I tried to do too much peshat when it's really midrash. Okay? Now, girls, there's a couple of other midrashim I'm going to speak about before I get to the next one. You know the midrash that says that, did you ever learn that the midrash of Bnei Yisrael died at the time Matan Torah, and then God brought back their neshamot and brought back their souls?
No, but it sounds interesting.
Okay, so I like to talk about that for a second because it's a well-known midrash that you may not have learned yet. Yatz'an Nishmatam. I don't know who's writing in the chat, but I need to type something in first. Then I can look at the chat. Nice. Yatz'an Nishmatam. Just doing a search to find this midrash. Here it is. It says in the midrash that God showed us his greatness. They didn't have enough power to stand in front of God. His neshama, their neshamot, like left them. Like the pasuk in Shira Shirim, Nafshi Yat'a B'dabero. Aval, look at this midrash. Who begged for Bnei Yisrael to get their neshamot back at Matan Torah? The Torah. Aval haTorah bikesha alehem rahamim. The Torah begged for mercy on behalf of Am Yisrael. That yesh melech masi bito behoreg anshe beto. Does a king marry off his daughter and kill all the people of the household? Kol ha'olam kulo semechim u'banechem metim. Right? You want your children dying? Does that make any sense? Right? This is the marriage of you with Am Yisrael. You want them dying? Yad hazera nishmatan. Right away their neshamot came back. Now, what's the purpose of this midrash? And by the way, I see a number of students here that attended Barkai. We're actually going to start teaching this. These Rashid that I'm teaching, we're going to start to just point out, the depth of these midrashim even more. I think it's very important. What's the idea behind this? That their neshamot left during Matan Torah and they were given back. What is the midrash trying to point out here, accomplish here, teach here? What exactly is the purpose?
To show how powerful Matan Torah is, maybe.
Right? Not maybe. Yes, very much so. To show, very good aura. To show how powerful, and not even powerful, how about overbearing? Do you know the Pesukim, the way they describe Matan Torah, are so overwhelming that Moshe Rabbeinu needed to take Bnei Yisrael out into the camp, out of their camp to come to Har Sinai. They were so scared, the Pasuk says, "Vayeherad kol ha'am asher b'machaneh." The whole people trembled. And then Moshe took them out of the camp. It sounds like he's like leading them. And when they come there, the whole mountain's shaking. The experience of Torah can take away a person's neshama because it's so overbearing. The idea being, it could be so overbearing that it can, quote unquote, kill someone in a sense. The connection with God can really overtake a person. But look at the other part of the Midrash. Who begged Rahamim for us? Who begged that we should come back to life, quote unquote? right?
The Torah.
Does the Torah speak? Does the moon speak? No. A Torah doesn't speak. A frog that's big doesn't jump out. But again, the Chachamim spoke in parables. The idea being the Torah, meaning the mitzvot, meaning we were created for the Torah. And the Torah says, God, you're giving a marriage ceremony now to be married onto you, to be connected with you, and you're breaking that connection by making it so good for them. I think the idea is, again, the mitzvot can be very overbearing, but then again, the same token, it can bring us mercy, right? God brings the Torah and the experience is overbearing, but it's the Torah itself that's willing to beg for forgiveness for us. Meaning that as difficult, and by the way, I'm speaking this out as I'm teaching you, so I didn't have all this figured out even before I taught this class. That's the beauty of Midrash and of students participating. I'm thinking that our connection with God can be overbearing, but the Torah that was given along with it, since it's our ultimate goal, it can keep us safe, quote unquote. Safe meaning in terms of God wanting us in this world, right? As long as you're willing to go with the goal of the Torah will request for mercy for you. Any questions on that? Now, the Midrash gets that from the following pasuk. Torah, it says that the Torah of Hashem is pure. It returns the soul, or it settles the soul, meaning the soul gets settled from Torah. Torah can settle, and I've had this experience before, where I've been in a rough situation in terms of just like my head spinning, everything, and I study good Torah, something beautiful, and it just settles the soul. Right? It settles the soul. So this Midrash also speaks the beauty of the Torah and how it connects with our soul. And you have to think about that. It's hard sometimes. We're physical, but we have something inside of us that's not. Something that keeps us going. Our battery is our nefesh, our neshama. That's our battery. We have to feed the battery. Right? Just like your goof, you have to feed your nefesh, the Torah and mitzvot. Right? Yeah, Deborah, by the way, that's the feeling. There's Pirkei Avot especially, there's something about the connection with our Torah that can really make us feel connected in a way that makes us feel special. So that's just also a beautiful midrash. And I'll end with the following midrash. Okay? Every Friday night, we say, Shamor v'zachor b'dibur ehad. Every Friday night, right? Shamor v'zachor b'dibur ehad, right? Do you ever stop and think about what that means? Any of you ever think about what that means? Shamor v'zachor b'dibur ehad. Look at this Rashi. Right? Rashi's commenting on the fact that it says Shamor in one and Zachor in the other. And he says, Rashi, and then I'll take the comment. Someone just said was about to say something. 1 second. Shamor, shenehem bedibur ehad, uteva ahat ne'emru. In one utterance they were said. Right? Vechen, 1 second, it got lost. Hold on. Not only in one utterance of God, and they were heard at once. What does that mean they were heard at once? Right? What does that mean they were heard at once? How's that possible? We can't hear two things at once. Right? If me and someone else speaking at once, right? That's why teachers don't like when students interrupt. You can't understand. You can't do at once. What's going on over here? Right? How is this to be understood? It's a very difficult Rashi. Yes, someone was about to say something. Any ideas what this means? That they were said in one utterance and that they were heard in one utterance. What does that mean? Shama v'zachor. In one utterance they were said.
Maybe that they're connected. Sorry. That like you can't have one without the other.
Right. Good. That's one. Very good. They mean the same thing in some sense, meaning they are one and the same. And yes, Deborah?
I was gonna say like that like they're like it's trying like they're both teaching like a different lesson that with like shamar it's saying that like you have to, I think shamar is saying that you have to like saying to like do all of the things that you're supposed to do on Shabbat, and then zachor is not to like remember all the things you're not supposed to, or the opposite. I'm not sure which one's which.
Very good. Just thinking about the differences between shamor and zachor, which is very important. And that's the point. Zachor and shamor, though, right? Zachor and shamor, they're similar, right? But how? So Ibn Ezra is a famous Ibn Ezra. He says, "V'chasher hipasnu b'divrei Hazal, ma amru hakacha, masanu she'amru zachor v'shamor b'divrei had ne'emru, v'zeh davar kasher mikol hakushot, she'alanu l'chasher hafaresh." This is a difficult question. Halila, you need to really understand this. God forbid, she'omer she'lo dibru nechona. God forbid that they didn't speak correctly. Rak anshe dorenu, just that people of our generation, yahshevu ki divrehem kemashma'am. They think that the rabbis meant that literally. Ve'enenu. And they didn't mean that literally. Right? Ve'lo yitachen bevat achat. Right? It's not a miracle. So what does that mean, Zachor v'shamor? Right? What does that mean? And what is it talking about, says Ibn Ezra? And he says the following. He says, he says it can't be because you wouldn't understand it if you heard it at the same time. Because if you hear the sheen, you won't hear the zayin. And if you hear the mem, you won't hear the chaf. You girls are following? You girls are following or no?
Yeah.
So therefore, this what? He said that Zachor and Shamor, when it comes to Zachor v'Shamor, here we go. Hazechira kolelet hashemira. Remembering includes in it guarding. The tam Zachor, when you say Zachor, you should remember what day it is of the week. And what's the reason for that? So that you should keep the seventh day. So we say that the idea that they're said at once is that their meanings are intertwined. Shamor is connected with Zachor. So that when someone hears Zachor, they're also thinking Shamor as well. Like if I say rock, girls, what other word are you thinking when I say the word rock? Did any of you hear the word stone when I said rock or no?
No.
Okay, let's try a different one. Got to think of something, right? Try to think of something that when you're speaking about a topic, you might say a sentence. And when you say sentence, you might replace that word with a different word that you may know as well as a synonym. Trying to think of a good explanation, a good way to phrase this, right? Okay, I can't think of an example right now, but there are times, girls, you could think of it, where you hear a sentence from a teacher or from a class or from a parent, and you replace the word that you may know better or that with that word and say, oh, she or he means this. They mean this too, right? They mean that as well. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but there are examples that I'm trying to think of a good example of that.
I have one.
Yes.
Kind of like when you're taking like a test or something, and like it asks you for like the best like definition for like the word that like, I don't know, I'm trying to like explain.
Deborah, I have a better one. I have a good one. When a teacher writes a question on the test and you know what that word means, but when you think about it, you replace with a different word. Okay, I like that one. Maybe pasta or noodles, but yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe as well. Sofa and couch. Good one, right? So, girls, I want you to remember this class very well. So the next time you do and you learn it, right? So if it is saying when you hear the word remember, other things come up in your mind about remembering. What does that mean? I need to remember it. What do I need to do to remember it? Do I need to write something down? Do I need to really remember it in years from now? Do I have to paste it somewhere on the wall? Right, what am I doing? And it says that Zachor and Shamor are like Shamor is part of the Zachor element, right? That's what he's saying. And so with that also we speak about that these midrashim need to be understood past just a literal explanation of them, right? Understanding them according to parables and deeper explanations. And when we do that, the Rambam says, we're really understanding what Hazal we're trying to do. And so, girls, I hope with my class this summer, I exposed you to enough midrash for you to start appreciating midrash a lot more. I'm hoping sometime in the near future to continue teaching classes like this. When? That's a good question. I don't know the status right now of my high school minyan betorah, meaning what their plans are and things like that. But I am hoping to give classes during the year. And if I do, I may continue Midrashim, and I'll tell you why. Because the Midrashim on Bereshit, if you thought the Midrashim on Devarim are beautiful and B'midbar, the ones on Bereshit and Shemot are even, I think they're just become a little more interesting because they're about stories that you know. And it becomes easier also to know some Midrashim and then explain them. So I'm thinking about that. So I'll keep in touch. But really, girls, yes, thank you, Deborah, for that final push. I really should. And by the way, classes like this push me to do it because it really lets me write out my thoughts. But Deborah, when you write that book, I was thinking to type the book, but no problem. Aha, that's a good example. There you go. Right, when you wrote,
Okay.
What'd you say, Deborah?
No, I was just saying that that's okay.
No, that's my point. Remember I said before about a sentence that you read and writing may indicate typing or something else, right? What are you writing with, right? So I may type it, not write it, but I'm writing it because I'm typing it. So it's similar. Hey, girls, Baruch Hanal Amen. Really, thank you so much for joining this summer. I really enjoyed this class a lot. You think you may enjoy it? I enjoy teaching. So thank you.